Hi! We're back for another witchy video today. Last week I did a video about just the basics of how to become a witch, or better stated, how to know that you are a witch. And in that video I explained that it's very important to do a lot of studying before you decide you want to delve into witchcraft, because it's important to know every element you possibly can of every path. Because this week we're talking about finding your path, how to find your path, what kinds of paths exist in witchcraft. So I'm assuming if you're watching this video, either you're just curious, or if you are interested in witchcraft, that you have followed the instructions in the last one and you've done some studying. So how do you find your path? Well, first let's go into different paths that there are. Two of the paths that you have to choose from are the right-hand path and the left-hand path. And unfortunately, it's going to be very difficult for you to study these properly because the media and the internet alike have done a very terrible job of explaining them. You honestly, in order to fully understand right versus left-hand path, you're going to have to either seek out a witch who practices one or the other and actually talk to them and gain their insight on what they believe it is, or you need to seek out some YouTubers who practice either the right or the left-hand path and listen to what they have to say, because unfortunately for us, people all over the internet and in real life try to convince others that the left-hand path is this selfish, evil, and dangerous path, and some even tell others that they worship demons or Satan, which is moronic because witches, for the most part, don't even believe in Satan, especially not the pagan ones. So the left-hand path has been made into this really awful, nasty thing. Yes, the left-hand path is dark magic, but dark magic and black magic are two very different things, and that's again something that the media and the internet have gotten really twisted up. Black magic is the act of using magic like spells, divination, rituals, anything to hurt someone else for no good reason. They did nothing at all to you. You just decided that you don't like them for one reason or another, or you think that you'll get a kick out of it and it'll be fun, so you just decide to be an asshole and attack them with magic by cursing or hexing them. That's black magic. Only bad people do that. I'm not going to sit here and pretend every witch is this pious, wonderful thing, because every religion and every belief system has good and bad people in it, and unfortunately those are the bad people. Dark magic is not the same as that. Dark magic has a few layers. One of those layers is the act of looking within yourself and finding the darkness inside yourself. It doesn't sound fun, and it isn't fun, but witches who follow the left-hand path and who practice dark magic think that in order to be the best possible versions of themselves in the present and in the future, it's important to look on your past and force yourself to face the bad things you've done to yourself or to others in your life, to face them head on, to admit to them, and to really pick apart why they happened so that you don't have history repeating itself in your life. And this isn't for everyone. It's not an easy thing to do. It's really difficult. It's really painful emotionally. But if you're practicing left-hand path, chances are you're probably going to have to do a lot of soul searching and looking back at the shitty things you did in your past and trying not to repeat them. Something else that people on the left-hand path do, and that people who practice dark magic do, is they do things like reversing curse and hexes. They kind of do return to sender, bounce back, kind of like I'm rubber and you're glue type of situation. So if someone goes to a left-hand path witch or a witch who practices dark magic and says, listen, there's this person in my life and they've attacked me, they've cursed me, and my life has been really bad lately, can you please do something about it? That witch then might do a return to sender, which means that they're just taking the curse they put on that innocent person and sending it right back to them so that karma bites them in the ass. Or they will curse or hex them back in a way. That sounds really bad. It's not quite what I mean by it. But basically they'll be like, well, I'm going to do like a karma spell on this person so that they're faced with the actions that they're faced with the atrocities they've committed towards the innocent party, and they're going to be punished for it. Or they might call on some kind of divine energy, a deity or a spirit of some kind, to take away that person's power or, hurt them back. Basically, it's kind of like karma, dark magic. And the other thing to know about the left-hand path or dark magic is that they don't worship or celebrate the same deities and the same spirits as the right-hand path or light magic. They would be more inclined to go for something like a phoenix or a dragon, something that's large and dark and powerful and sometimes dangerous, not in the way that most people would think. It's not going to just like side swipe you in the middle of a ritual or something, but you do have to be careful. This is like the deities I mentioned in my first video that are a little more chaotic. They're not bad, they're not evil, you don't have to find them scary. They're just darker and more powerful and more inclined to possibly take advantage of you if you don't know what you're doing and you offend them. So hopefully that clears up what the left-hand path is a little bit, since the internet has decided to just shit all over it. On the opposite side of the coin, we have the right-hand path or the light magic path. Many consider this to be the path of light. Unfortunately, the word light has somewhat become synonymous with the words good or pure, and that's not entirely accurate because it leads people to believe that it's a better path than the left-hand path. The truth is both paths are gray. People who would celebrate the right-hand path of witchcraft would be people like Wiccans, where everything revolves around life and nature spirits and protecting the environment and being kind to people. So a lot of nature-based religions, a lot of lighter elements like fairies and unicorns and kindly energies and kindly gods and goddesses, just creatures that you think of as more like cheerful and uplifting and just kindly. Creatures that are there to heal and assist. They're not entirely good, just like the left isn't entirely bad, just different strokes for different folks, kind of. Some people are more inclined towards the left-hand path, especially if they're trying to become a better person in a more upfront way, and some people prefer the right path if they're more, inclined towards these lighter spirits. Some of the pros of being a left-hand path witch are that it's a little more free. You're going against what most people would consider to be normal or acceptable, and that makes you a very proud and unafraid person, so you're less likely to put up with someone's bullshit and get upset about it. If someone approached you on your left-hand path and decided to bully you for it, you'd be more likely to just be like, fuck off, than get upset. That's not to say that right-hand people are going to be really emotional about it and everything, just that it will come easier to a left-hand person. You also get to do more shadow work. I guess that could be a pro or a con depending on the person. Shadow work is what I was explaining before about the soul searching and kind of looking at the ugly parts of yourself. The cons of being on the left-hand path are that don't expect anybody, including some other witches, to understand it. You will be misunderstood much worse than most witches throughout the entirety of your life. People are going to see it as what Hollywood paints it as. They're going to think you're satanic, they're going to think you're evil, that you want to hurt them, that you're going to curse them, and no matter how much you try to explain it away, chances are they are not going to believe you because they've been conditioned to believe something else. The other con of being on the left-hand path is that it's mentally and emotionally and spiritually taxing. Like I said, you're confronting things in your life that most people shy away from, so it is going to come at a price, and you're going to have to spend an equal amount of time working on that path and giving yourself a break so you don't hurt yourself. Cons of being on the right-hand path are that people occasionally become so wrapped up in being positive and happy and utilizing all of their energy to help others that they burn themselves out and begin to wear a mask of happiness in order to make it appear that they're happy. A lot of people on the right-hand path feel like it's their duty as a witch to take care of other people, and yes, it absolutely is. As a witch, you should want to take care of other people, but They feel like if they say no to a single person today and there's 500 people in their inbox asking for their help, that something bad will happen to that person, and because of that they end up with psychic burnout, which is absolutely horrendous. You never want to get it, trust me. Make sure you give yourself a break. If you're on the right-hand path or you're interested in it, know that you can't do better than your best. That's all you can do, is the best that you can. And yeah, you might have an absolutely ludicrous amount of people in your inbox asking you for help, and you might really desperately want to help all of them today, but that's not always possible. You can't be not eating, giving yourself only 3 hours of sleep and everything because you're taking care of someone else, because eventually you're gonna get burnout, you're gonna be physically exhausted, and if you're too burnt out and exhausted to commune with the spirit world, you can't help them anyway, so you've kind of already went against what you believe. Some of the pros of being on the right-hand path are that you will still get bullied by people and misunderstood by them, but because most people on the right-hand path present themselves in a more socially acceptable way, not all of them, but most of them, people tend to just brush by it as, oh, that's just like a hippie or something, and not really think that much about it. And since you do most of your work out in nature, as long as you're not loudly screaming like, I call upon the gods of earth and stuff at the top of your lungs, chances are people aren't going to even realize what you're doing, and they're going to think you're just chilling in the forest like they are. Another pro of the right-hand path is how uplifting it is. It's a little more positively based than the left-hand path. Again, it's not better, it's not inherently good. Now that that's out of the way, we have to go on to other paths in witchcraft. This is going to be a long one, guys. There are numerous paths that you can follow, and trying to decide on one can be a daunting task. Before deciding that you are ready to choose a path, you need to have studied all of them, or at least all of them that you possibly can. It's easier to go in with some prior knowledge than to just dive in blind. It will make things easier for you if you've studied as many paths as possible. And by paths this time, what I mean is like the different types of witchcraft, like hedge witch, green witch, fairy witch, draconic witch, things like that. Study all of them as best you can so you can get a really decent understanding of it. It's not required that you study it, but it's a good idea. This next part will be my own personal opinion, so you're free to disagree with it. Just be kind about your disagreement. Every witch has a different way of finding their path, so what you ask me, when you ask me how to find your path, I'm going to have a different story than somebody else, and they will have a different one than somebody else, and so on and so on. So you don't have to just take my word for this, you can ask other witches as well. The way I see it, there are two ways you can decide your path. One is you can study as many paths as you can at length, know them and understand them inside and out until one jumps out. And once you have a working knowledge of each path, you'll be able to understand which one makes the most sense to you and what you want to do in your journey through witchcraft. So basically, it's kind of like going to college for witchcraft. That's one way of finding what path you want to stick to, is by just studying them and picking them apart and saying, you know what, this one matches my philosophy and my outlook on life and what I want to do the most, so that's the kind of witch I'm going to be. And the other way of finding your path is your path will simply find you and choose you, and that's what happened to me. In order to explain this properly, I'm gonna delve back into my spiritual awakening and tell you exactly what happened to me so that you can get a better understanding. So when I was younger, I was going through some really bad stuff in my life, and long story short, I was on suicide watch and I was incredibly unhappy, and I felt like nothing in my life made any sense. I was being forced into situations that made me uncomfortable and that I didn't agree with. I was being forced into a religion that I didn't agree with and that I had a lot of problems with. Just all around my life was in a pretty bad state at that point in time. And I was living in my parents' house, and in the back of their property is this big forest. And I used to enjoy going out into the forest just to clear my head and relax and take photographs and everything. It just, ever since I was 6 years old, that forest just always made me feel welcome and at home no matter how bad I was feeling before I got there. So at the peak of this depression, I decided to just go out into the forest, and I went out feeling like I don't know what to do. I need to get out of this situation. I want to fix myself, and I want to be happy. I want to be understood. I want to find something, some kind of sign somewhere that everything will be okay. And as I'm walking in the forest, in the wind, it almost sounded like voices whispering. Not in the like crazy way, it just was just those hushed, unintelligible whisperings, and I brushed it off as just my imagination and went back inside. And I had already felt a little bit more uplifted just from being in that forest, and I decided to lie down on my bed. And at this point in time, my entire family was in another state on a vacation, so I had the whole house to myself, and I was just lying in bed and kind of wondering again what was going on in my life. And all of a sudden, I kind of astral projected. I knew I was still in bed physically, but I kind of like floated above myself, and that spirit self was compelled to go into the forest again. So I kind of see myself going into the forest, and as I go inside, I reach this clearing. And in the clearing is a stag with huge, gorgeous antlers, and it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Like, it was obviously a deer to me, but it was more beautiful than any deer I'd ever seen in my entire life. And something was pushing me to go towards it, like it wasn't going to be afraid of me. And as I got closer and closer to this stag, I was getting this overwhelming sense of absolute love. I can't explain it. It's not romantic, it's not familial, it's not friendship. It's a different kind of overwhelming love altogether that you can't explain, you just have to feel it. And as I got closer and closer, he kind of shape-shifted. He kept the antlers, he kept some of the fur, but he also took on some characteristics of a man. And I wasn't afraid, even though it was happening right before my eyes. I wanted to get closer and closer, and as I was just about on top of this entity, I snapped back to my room and opened my eyes, and I saw nothing in the bedroom that was out of the ordinary, but I felt like arms were wrapped around me. And it felt, I don't know how to explain it, I knew it was him. I knew it was him embracing me while I was lying on the bed. And I became overwhelmed with emotion. I was crying a lot as I felt these arms around me, and I very clearly, in the softest, kindest male voice I've ever heard in my life, heard the words, "It will be okay. It will be alright." And from then on, every time I desperately needed guidance, or I was celebrating, anytime I had a really huge thing happened in my life, I would hear that voice, I would feel him, and I knew that day that was my spirit guide. Now, before I met him, I didn't know anything about the Stag Lord or the Lord of the Forest. And about a week after this incident, of course, I told my best friend, and I told people who were close to me who wouldn't think I was insane. And a week later, I was just scrolling around online, just as I normally would, and all of a sudden, something about the Stag Lord came up, and I was like, that looks like who I just saw. What is this? And I clicked it, and it's like he somehow made it so I would find information on him, and I kept studying it more and more, and I realized through that I wanted to be a witch of the forest and a witch of the Fae, because that is the realm, I guess, that makes the most sense to me personally and that I am closest to. So that is how I found my path. And if you've been studying a lot, if you've been studying different paths and you're having a hard time still, you just aren't really sure what path to follow even after years worth of studying maybe, don't be discouraged, because chances are you're not meant to find it then. Chances are it will come to you when you need it the most. And you just have to be really patient. It's an unfortunate part of the craft. You just have to be a really patient person sometimes, even if you don't want to be. And the last little bit of knowledge I want to bestow upon you before ending this video is that you do not have to stick to one path permanently. If you say, I want to be an eclectic Wiccan because that's what makes sense to me right now, and you spend 20 years being an eclectic Wiccan, and then all of a sudden when you're like 56 years old, you start realizing that being a draconic witch makes more sense and is a better path for you, it's okay. You're allowed to change paths. And that doesn't mean that you're disrespecting the path that you were before. It doesn't mean that you're abandoning it. Witches just change paths sometimes, because spirits come to you, like I said, when you need them most, and there are different spirits who are in charge of different things. So if you're pretty happy right now, and that's why you're an eclectic Wiccan, and everything's pretty much sunshine and rainbows, but then later on in your life you kind of need a kick in the pants a little bit, and that's what makes draconic witchcraft a little more alluring, that's okay. It just means that your entities you were working with before know that you need those dragons more right now. I hope this made sense to you guys and that it helped anyone who might be having trouble finding their path. If you have any questions, you're confused, you can comment, and everyone's welcome obviously to have any kind of discussion in the comments they want. If I don't answer you, it's not because I'm ignoring you. I just get really busy during the day. I'm currently working on a graphic novel series and there is a deadline. But know that I saw it, and if it's an absolute emergency and you need a lot of help, go to my Instagram DMs. I tend to check those a lot more often than YouTube comments, and if it's an emergency, I can help you there. As always, do something that makes you happy today, no matter what anyone else thinks about it, and I will see all of you with another witchy video next week.